So good morning everybody and welcome to Falls They Don't Have to Happen to You. And so my name's John Robertson and I'm going to try and teach you all about falls. We're going to look at what a fall actually is, the causes, the consequences of falls, and things that you can do to reduce your risk of falling. And I do suggest that you pay attention because there is a quiz at the end. Okay? And of course I want everybody to receive a passing grade. So a few things that you need to know. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today can be concerning, especially if you are 65 and older. The important thing to remember is that knowledge gives you power. And when you know what you're faced with, you can then make decisions about what you're going to do about it. So falls are the leading cause of injury deaths amongst people aged 65 and older. Roughly 4 out of 10 injury deaths are caused by falls. And falls are the major cause of non-fatal injuries and a common cause of hospital admissions for traumatic injuries amongst older adults. One in 4 falls results in hospitalization. And for the most part, fall prevention is ignored outside of selective settings. The last time you went to see your primary care provider, were you asked about your balance? Were you asked about any concerns about falling? You were?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. You weren't? No? No. Okay, so we got roughly 1 in 4 people here was asked about falling and balance. And when falls are the leading cause of injury death, shouldn't a person's balance and risk of falling be of concern to your primary healthcare provider? Yeah. Really, it should be. It should be one of the most important questions they ask. But unfortunately, most of them are not really aware of the true severity of this problem. And for the most part, it's not seen as an important public health problem. And that is definitely borne out by the fact that there's very few people here. Is that people just don't realize what a problem it is. And it's not just the general public that doesn't realize this, but it's also the healthcare industry and local governments and places like that that generally don't have this realization of how big a concern it really is. And so generally falls are seen as inevitable with aging, and roughly every 13 to 16 seconds an older adult is treated in the emergency room for a fall. And every 20 minutes an older adult dies as a direct result of a fall. So 4 people every minute admitted to the emergency room. So that is 240 people an hour admitted to the emergency room because of a fall. And this is only seniors. This is only over age 65. Doesn't count people under 65. And so every hour, 3 people die as a direct result of a fall. And this is the US alone. And most Western countries have similar statistics. The incidence of falling is about the same worldwide. The good news is that falls are preventable and there are things that you can do to reduce your risk of falling. And it is important to recognize that you cannot eliminate the risk of falling completely unless you stay in bed for the rest of your life, which does not completely eliminate the risk of falling.
Why do they think it's as you get older, there's more risk of falling? Is there an imbalance that occurs as you get older?
Why is there a higher risk of falling as you get older? We will talk about that.
Okay, I will wait.
So, good question, but just wait a
I will wait.
little minute.
I'll be patient.
It is a good question.
Yes. So the question is, what is a fall? Any ideas?
You lose balance and go on the ground.
Lose balance and go on the ground.
Boom.
That's a pretty good answer. So the clinical definition of a fall was created in 1987 by a doctor called Mary Tinetti, who was very interested in falling among seniors. And so the clinical definition of a fall is a sudden, unintentional change in position causing one to land on a lower level, an object, the floor, or the ground. So it is not just that you are upright and you fall to the floor. It also includes your going to sit down. You know, one of the classic ones is somebody goes to sit in a wheelchair that is not secured. They go and try and sit down on it, and because it's not secured, the wheels move away and they fall. Or that they go to sit on a chair, they don't hit the chair correctly, and they end up on the floor. So the important things are that it's sudden and it's unintentional. Okay? And you land on something that is lower than what you intended to land on. So the consequences of a fall. Falls can be devastating, especially among seniors. While I was talking and promoting this class, I spoke with a number of people who've known people who have fallen recently, and they're like, this is happening, and it's classically this. Is that because people fall, it's a traumatic event, they don't want to fall again, so they begin to restrict their activities so that they don't fall. So that means that they don't go out as much. They don't go out and socialize as much. So you get this self-imposed restriction of activity, which can turn into social isolation. Is that people will stay at home because they're afraid to go out, because they're afraid to fall, because they know the devastating effects of a fall. Which is unfortunate, because social interaction is actually a bigger predictor of longevity than exercise is. So it's actually more important to socialize than to exercise. And so when you impose social isolation on yourself, the mental stress that takes can be enormous for a lot of people. And so people will fall into depression. They'll experience a further decline in balance, because balance is very much use it or lose it. If you don't practice your balance will get worse. And then you get an increased risk of falling because you're not practicing your balance. You don't need to see me. So, Lola, here's the answer to your question of why people fall. So there are physical reasons that people fall. And the first one, and I've talked about this in classes recently, is fractures. Is people fall because they break a bone. Typically, they break a leg, or more often they break a hip because of the way that they walk and the impact of their body on their bones. And if they have osteopenia or osteoporosis, those bones break and the person falls. And so quite often with a broken hip, the broken hip is the cause of the fall rather than the fall being the cause of the broken hip. So things like spinal disorders, where you have problems with backache and sore back, scoliosis, and anything like that, that again restricts your ability to move, can cause a fall. So we have joint problems with arthritis and stiffness. If you have arthritis, particularly in your feet, your ankles, your knees, and your hips, it restricts the mobility of those joints, which restricts your ability to move, which restricts your ability to control your balance. And then we have muscular, that people get weaker as they get older. The age typically is around 42. Once you hit 42, you really start to lose muscle mass at a greater rate. But particularly leg strength is very important for your balance. And then there's flexibility and inflexibility. So that's either being too flexible or not being flexible enough. There's a definite balance in the amount of flexibility that you should have. Okay? So gymnasts that are very flexible have problems with stability in their joints, and that they can't control the way that the joint moves because they're too flexible. Lola.
I have a question. That's physical, but if your mind is constantly working on other things, you're not paying attention.
You're not paying attention
to where you're going and what you're doing, and you could fall.
Yes, indeed.
I'm speaking from experience. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So keeping your mind, your attention on what you're actually doing is a hugely important thing. So neurological. So if you suffer from things like multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's, those things have a big impact on your balance. If you have dementia, Alzheimer's disease, if you have fainting and passing out, which is generally blood pressure issues, if you have headaches, or you're not paying attention to what you're doing. Okay? And then there are sensory things. So there are things like your vision, that you need to be able to see where you're going. If you can't see where you're going, you can trip over things, you can bump into things. Your hearing has a very big impact on your balance. Your inner ear is a critical part of your balance system. So having your hearing checked on a regular basis is really important for maintaining your balance, reducing your risk of falling. And then we have somatosensory, that's proprioception. That's knowing where you are. That's knowing where your body is in time and space. That's knowing that your front foot, when you're doing parting the wild horse's mane, is pointing straight forward and not out to the side. Okay? So that's something that we talked about in Lombard this week, but we didn't talk about in Roselle this week. So it all balances out as to what the classes get, and it all depends what's going on. But that's one of the things that Tai Chi builds in you, is this idea of proprioception, of knowing where your body actually is in space. So that when you put your foot down on the floor and you think that you're pointing straight forward, it actually is pointing straight forward and not out to the side. But that goes for everything else as well. Knowing where your hands are, knowing where your waist is. Okay? And then of course you've got combinations of all of these things. You've got the physical aspects, so if you have muscular weakness, if you have peripheral neuropathies, that you can't feel where your feet are, and you have hearing loss, and you have vision loss, all of these things combine. So it's not just one thing, it's a big combination of everything that's happening to you as you get older. Because all of these things decline with age. Our stuff wears out. And a lot of time if you don't use it, you lose it. Which is one of the reasons why balance and movement is so important for your longevity. There's been talk starting over the last few years about how being sedentary is just as bad for you as smoking. The time that you spend sitting down is not time spent moving, which improves your blood circulation, which helps maintain your balance, which helps maintain your muscle mass, which helps to engage your brain, all of these things. So it's like, get up and go for a walk. I sometimes wonder if it's better to get up and go for a walk and have a cigarette than it is to sit and watch the television. I'm not suggesting that you do that, okay? Smoking is not good for you. Okay, so those are the things that happen to us. The external influences that we have, medications that we're on, they have an effect on our balance. Traumatic incidents, whether you slip on something, you trip over something. We're starting to move into the winter. And there's a lot of ice and snow about, sidewalks are starting to get slippy, so your risk of falling increases. So there are occupational, so work hazards. If you're still working, then things that you do at work can increase your risk of falling. Weather, I just mentioned winter coming up, so you've got ice, you've got snow, you've got mud, you've got all sorts of things like that. Then there's the environmental conditions of the world around you. What is the world around you like? Are there things in the world around you that increase your risk of falling? The design of some things increases your risk of falling.
And would that be like removing scatter rugs that you could slip on in the home?
Things like that would include removing scatter rugs and things that you can slip and trip on, yes. I mean, we have a classic example in here, the chairs that you're sitting on. Those chairs are increasing your risk of falling versus a different design. Because if you look at these chairs, what's the feet like? This part here is a curve. These are real easy to overbalance. And they are, so the fact that those chairs are designed with curves on the bottom of the legs means that they are not as stable as a chair with proper feet.
Is this a good time to tell my environmental story?
It could be.
Okay, can they hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, they can hear you.
Okay, so friends, I was in Florida and I was with a girlfriend and we were in the bottom level of a parking garage and it was daytime and there were lights but it was very dark and there were speed bumps in there that were painted black and my girlfriend was having some kind of emotional meltdown. I was trying to help her and I was looking for a staircase up over the back of my shoulder and I didn't see a speed bump and I face planted without putting my hands down at all. The first thing that hit was my nose And I ended up in the hospital and trauma ward and all that kind of thing, and it was bad. And John saw my face, and it was bad. But I remember thinking as I was falling, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
But then I thought of the whole thing later, and I thought, you know, if you're in a dark parking garage, the speed bumps should not be painted black.
Correct.
So that's an example, I think.
So that could have been a very good time to have spoken to a lawyer. Seriously, because you think about environmental conditions. So the owner of the parking garage did not provide adequate lighting. They did not provide adequate warning of trip hazards. But then you've also got the fact that you were distracted going on there. So like there's a number of things that are coming together to create the incident. So it's not just one factor. You've got, like off the top of my head without looking deeper into it, there's 3 factors there that caused that incident. 2 of which were environmental. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so the very design of the world around us is dangerous. And especially if you're not aware of these things. So how aging increases your fall risk. So you have less muscle and less power in your legs because it's your legs that support you. So inflexibility, particularly your knees, your hips, your ankles, which is why in my Abbey class and my Wooddale class where we use chairs, we always do ankle rotations. Because ankle rotations are hugely important for fall prevention. How flexible your ankles are is a big indicator of how likely you are to survive an uneven surface. And so there are a lot of older adults that will not walk on grass because the surface is uneven and their feet cannot cope with the uneven surface. And that's because their proprioception is not as good, their flexibility is not as good, so the foot can't adjust to the surface as easily. And so it becomes difficult to walk on an uneven surface. Plus we spend most of our lives walking on a perfectly flat surface. Almost everywhere that most people go is a perfectly flat surface. In your home, they're generally perfectly flat. You walk out, you walk on the sidewalk, you walk to the parking lot, you're at the grocery store. So unless you actually go out and walk on like a lawn or grass or somewhere like that, your experience of an uneven surface is just a fraction of the time that you actually spend moving around. So we get slower reflexes as we age. We just can't react as fast. And so when you do come across an uneven surface and your foot is trying to find where it is on the floor, it doesn't do that as fast as it used to do when you were young. And if somebody bumps into you, your reaction to that bump is not as fast as it was. And so that increases your reaction time, and so your risk of falling increases because you just can't react as fast. Our vision declines as we age. And so again, that ability to be able to see things. So when you go into an environment that has poor lighting, like a parking garage, you're at a higher risk because it's harder to see things that are likely to trip you up. And if it's dark and they paint those things black, then your ability to see them is greatly reduced. So less ability to sense changes in the floor surface through the feet. So that's that walking on grass and uneven surfaces. So we have a slower walking speed. We take shorter, narrower steps. And what do we practice in Tai Chi? We practice broader steps, and we practice maintaining our stride length. So if you're over the age of 75, this is in the general population, somewhere around 13 to 14% have some form of visual impairment. 24-25% have some hearing impairment or loss of feeling, proprioception, neuropathy issues, but a whopping way over 70% have some form of balance impairment, be that caused by hearing impairment, neuropathies, vision impairment, muscular weakness, and all of those things put together. This is not the most cheerful of classes. I will
No, it
admit that.
isn't. That I can tell you.
But remember that knowledge is power.
Well,
When you understand these things, you then have choices to make about what you do. Okay? So Karen, the fact that you go out and golf a lot, the fact that you're walking on grass a lot, is hugely good for your balance.
I just need to take off my shoes.
And if you took your shoes off to golf, you'd get your earthing in at the same time. Okay?
Yeah.
So non-fatal injuries amongst the over 65 group, falls are responsible for around 63% of non-fatal injuries. Car accidents are a whopping 6%. So the chances that you're going to fall and injure yourself are 10 times more likely than you're being injured from a car accident. Okay? And so like all the other causes are pretty small. You know, there's nothing that's over 10, there's nothing that's over 7%, whereas falls are 63%. Now when you get onto fatal injuries, motor vehicle accidents rise significantly because it's a very traumatic event to a senior. And 42% of fatal injuries are caused by falls. And falls can actually be covered by some of the unspecified, the suffocation, because you fall, and then because of the fall, whatever situation you can be in, that can induce some other form of death. Of like, you can't breathe, so you suffocate.
What's unspecified? Anything else?
Anything else? Why there's an unspecified and an other, I don't know. So one of the worst things about this is that the rate of falling is increasing. It's not that it's going down, which is what it really should be. It's like we should be doing things because we know that this is a problem. We should be doing things to help people reduce their risk of falling. But the risk of falling is increasing. So in 2004, it was around 41% death rate per 100,000 seniors. That is now up in 2013. So in less than 10 years, it's gone up from 41 people per 100,000 to 56 people per 100,000. So the rate that seniors are dying because of falls is increasing. Now, some of that is because we have longer life expectancies, and the older that you are, the more traumatic a fall is and the more likely you are to die from a fall. So at 65 versus 85, if you have a fall, you are much more likely to die from that fall at 85 than you are at 65. So the fact that, for the most part, we are living longer lives is contributing to this. However, having said that, life expectancy in the US is currently declining. Okay? So your children and your grandchildren are likely to live shorter lives than you do statistically. Is there a reason for that? Yes. Diet, lifestyle. Yeah. The fact that we are becoming a more sedentary society, the food that we eat is not really food. So all the things that go into my Secrets of Living a Long Life class.
Didn't know you had one.
That's why you got to read my newsletters.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so age groups. So the rate of injuries that are non-fatal in falls is actually highest in the teenage age group. Because what do teenagers do? Stupid things. They do more risky activities. They do more sports, things like that, which, because they've got the energy to do it, but the rate that we do that declines as we age. So we do less activities that are likely to cause an injury. But if you look at the death rate, even though we're doing less, the death rate increases, and when you get to the 65 plus age group, it rockets. Okay? So your chance of dying from a fall, if you're 15 to 17, is like next to nothing. You know, how often do kids fall over? They fall over all the time, but they don't injure themselves. But when you do that same thing when you're 65, it's a very different consequence. You know? And the thing is that even in the teenage years, people are still experimenting with their balance and their bodies. And their bodies are changing, sometimes extremely rapidly. You know, I'm sure you've had kids or grandkids that have where did that extra 6 inches of height come from this year? You know? So you've got this change going on as well. Okay, so fall injuries amongst people over 65. So there are roughly in the US around 36 million falls every year. And this is reported falls. This doesn't include unreported falls. Okay? Approximately 3 million of those falls result in a visit to the emergency room. And of that 3 million, 32,000 seniors a year die as a direct result of that fall. That's 3 people an hour. Roughly 800,000 people are treated in the emergency room and hospitalized. And close to 2.2 million are treated in the emergency room and sent home. That's a lot of people.
So why is the reason that there's a difference there? Is it because of the pre-existing conditions they have when they fall?
A difference between what?
Treated in the ER and hospitalized or died, is that big, that increase because they have pre-existing conditions so that when they fall it's more serious?
Well, that could be. It's, you know, there are so many reasons that people fall. You think about what we said, you've got the physical reasons, you've got the environmental reasons, you've got all of those reasons of why people fall.
So it's not necessarily from the fall that they have died or
No. This is people. These are the statistics on seniors, 65 and over, who have experienced a fall.
And as a result.
And as a result, as a direct result of that fall, 32,000 died as a direct result of that fall.
If they had
It's not that they fall and die of something else.
Yeah.
They die because they have fallen. Yes?
Just think
You're-
of a
you're looking-
ladder.
Think of the ladder.
You're looking.
My kids won't let me go on a ladder.
No.
And that's good.
Yeah.
So what's causing the confusion?
I'm kind of thinking that I do fall, so that this is, and it's increased as I've gotten older, so I'm trying to place myself in that picture.
Yes.
And so when I have fallen a total since I'm 77 now, and since I have turned 65, I've had 4 major falls.
Okay.
That's pretty much.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm in Tai Chi. One of the reasons.
And that's a very wise decision to make. Yes.
So that's one of the preventions. So I'm hoping you're going to get the good news on how we can prevent this from happening.
Yes, we are going to get to why we need to prevent it happening. But you need to realize how important that is. And most people don't realize how important it is, hence the fact that there are not many people here. Because people don't know this. They don't know that 3 seniors die every hour as the direct result of a fall. That's why this room is next to empty. It's because people don't know. And the human condition is to say, well, it's never happened to me, so it won't happen to me. The vast majority of people that come to Tai Chi classes, the number of times I've heard, well, I fell recently and I've heard Tai Chi's good for a balance. Like, I've heard that hundreds of times.
That's why I came.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
one of the other things is that as you get older, you still think you can do the things that you could do 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
And until you give it a try, you know, climbing up a ladder or running up 2 or 3 steps at a time, then you kind of realize, wait a minute. But I guess some people don't get a second chance, you know, I mean, they take that ladder and go up and they're the one that falls
Yes.
or whatever.
And that's the whole denial thing of,
Yeah.
well, it's never happened to me, so it won't happen to me.
Right.
That's something that happens to other people
Yeah.
until it does happen to you. And the risk of falling, if you're over the age of 65, your risk of falling in the next 12 months is 1 in 4. Those are pretty good odds that you're going to fall. But people deny that.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that's borne out by the fact that there are so few people here. Because they don't know what a serious problem this is. And these statistics will continue until people realize what a serious issue this is.
It's
Which is why I try and do these classes and offer these classes, to tell people, to get them to know what a serious problem is. And do I use shock and awe tactics? I do. Part of the goal of this class is to frighten you a little bit, is to frighten you into realizing this is a serious problem. But once you realize how serious a problem it is, that gives you the information to do something about it.
But what's scary
Because-
is the medical community doesn't give you that information.
Correct.
And why is that? You know?
Those things at the beginning is that they don't, why? So the next time you go and see your primary care provider and you go wherever it is, you know, your annual physical or whatever, and if you get to the end of it and they haven't asked you about your balance and your fear of falling, ask them why they haven't asked you. Say to them, it's like, great, you know, this is all great, all these things are good. Why haven't you asked me about my balance
And
and my
know.
concern about falling when my risk of falling in the next 12 months is 1 in 4? You're very concerned about whether I have colorectal cancer. The chances of me getting colorectal cancer are, you know, whatever they are. They're not 1 in 4.
Yeah.
But you're very concerned about that. Shouldn't you be more concerned about something that I'm at higher risk of?
My
And find out what their answer
My
is.
primary care doctor knows I've fallen 4 times.
And if you've already fallen 4 times in the last 12 years,
Yeah,
that should be the first thing that they ask.
yeah.
And that should be part of Medicare. When if any of your bills are being, you know, offset by your Medicare, they have to ask you those questions
Well,
about,
they relate it to, I have weak ankles and I had sprained ankles and a broken ankle.
Right.
Different times. So they relate it to.
So
I got-
they just blame that and pass out.
but I mean, there's like a series of 20 questions that they ask you for aging.
Oh, yeah, the Medicare review or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so if you are in the 65 to 74-year-old age group, so 33% of injury deaths was a result of falls. Your chance of being shot, if you're 65 to 70, 35 seniors were shot. You know, so your risk of dying from violent crime is next to nothing.
Well, they haven't been here recently.
Yeah, right.
Now, if you go to the 75 to 84-year-old age group, causes of injury deaths now are 56%.
Oh, wow.
Your risk of being shot is less than half of what it was.
Do that again. What was that?
I want to know what the one person that died of overexertion was doing. You know, that one's always intrigued me. It's like, what are they overexerting themselves with? Now, if you're in the 85-year-old age group, 68% of injury deaths are caused by falls. So the older you get, the more likely you are to die of a fall. Okay?
Yeah.
So what are the results of falling? So 50% will suffer some form of traumatic brain injury. So the example that we had of the parking lot, the face plant on the nose, I mean, that can very easily, could have been a very traumatic brain injury. So 50% of falls, traumatic brain injury, because you fall and you hit your head. 30% is some form of lower extremity injury, broken hip, broken leg, something like that. 8% torso, and 3% some other head or neck injury. 9% some other injury, which is usually a broken arm, shoulder, elbow, wrist, something along those lines. Okay?
John,
Chris?
what about PTSD after you've had a traumatic fall? Would that count?
Absolutely, yes. But I've not been able to find any statistical evidence on that.
All right.
So PTSD is a big thing, and that goes back to one of the consequences of a fall, of the self-imposed isolation, that people restrict their activities. Those are all forms of post-traumatic stress.
Yep.
So like it's definitely there, but it's not directly named as post-traumatic stress disorder. But the fact that you're stressed about the fact that you've fallen, and you begin to restrict your activities and you impose self-isolation, is all post-traumatic stress. In my opinion, anyway.
Even the way you walk, like for me, the way I walk, my everything changed.
The way that you walk changes.
I wasn't walking,
Yes.
and it was hurting my hip because I was off balance then from that being afraid to walk a certain way.
Yeah. All right, so the costs of a non-fatal fall. So these are annual costs. Roughly the total cost of falls in the US is about $50 billion a year. 29 billion of that is paid by Medicare. 9 billion of that is paid by Medicaid. So it's all our tax money. 12 billion of it is out-of-pocket expenses. The cost of a fall to you as an individual is substantial, because Medicare and Medicaid do not cover all of it, especially when you get into rehab and things like that, because they basically don't provide enough rehab to get you to where you really should be in order not to fall again. And unfortunately, because they don't completely, they have, in a lot of circumstances, a lack of awareness. It's like they should be referring people to Tai Chi classes. You know, but they don't. And so people who fall again. And then they fall again, and again, and again, and again, until
They die.
I was not going to say until they die, but yes.
I'm trying to prevent that.
And if you're doing Tai Chi, you're doing that. 754 million is spent related to fatal falls. And the older you are, the more it costs, especially with out-of-pocket expenses. So these statistics are from 2018, which is the last time I did this seminar. By 2020, so by last year, falls were expected to cost $67.7 billion annually. That's a huge amount of money. And if you're talking about Medicare, 40% of Medicare expenses are incurred in the last year of your life. So where people fall.
Oh, good Lord.
So 55% of people fall inside their own home. 23% fall outside but near their home. You know, when I was researching this, it's like I found these statistics and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, your home is so dangerous. I moved. I'm like, I am not staying here. It is dangerous here. I'm moving. And it's only roughly 1 in 4 falls that occurs when you are away from your home. So the thing is that you fall where you are most familiar,
But not paying attention.
because you think you know where everything is, and you're more relaxed, and you don't pay as much attention. And of those falls that happen inside the home, guess where most of those falls happen? It happens between two places.
The bathroom.
The bathroom and
The bedroom.
the bedroom.
Oh, boy.
Yes. So what is your risk of falling? So your risk of falling in the next year, if you are 65 or older, it's 1 in 4.
Jeez.
If you are 75 or older, it is 1 in 2.
Jeez.
There we go.
If you have experienced a fall at any age, it's 1 in 2.
Oh.
So I did find a few years ago a very interesting study that was done on seniors and falling, because prior to this study, all the information that they had was all anecdotal. It was like somebody had experienced a fall, they were in hospital, they were interviewed, and they were asked, why did you fall? And that's how they constructed statistics. Now, falls happen very quickly. Do you always know why you fell? No, you don't. And so your recollection of why you fell may not be the actual reason that you fell. So that doesn't give true statistics. There is also the situation where people will lie about why they fell. Because if somebody lives in their own home and they want to stay in their own home, but their children are pressuring them to go into, a residential place, that person is not going to say, well, I lost my balance and fell over, because their kids are going to be, you're going in a home. And so people will lie as to why they fell. So this study, I believe, was done in 2012, and it was actually done in Canada, and what they did is they installed video surveillance in public areas in senior residences. And so they recorded all of the falls. And like when I first read about this, it's like video evidence of seniors falling, and I had this vision of camera crews wandering around the city like, oh look, there's somebody that looks like they're 70, let's follow them. And I had these visions of these camera crews following people around, waiting for them to fall.
Oh, God.
But it was video surveillance of these common areas.
Okay.
And so when somebody fell, they took the video evidence and they gave it to teams of experts to determine why those people fell. And what they discovered was that 41% of the falls that were recorded were the result of incorrect weight shifting.
They could tell that by watching a video?
Yes.
Oh,
So how would that be? Have I got an example of it?
So there are a number of videos on my website about this study,
Okay.
and it does show a number of the falls that are there. And there's a lady with a walker, and she goes to turn round, and she turns round, and she just like,
Oh,
good.
and she overbalances and falls over.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
But prior to this, most evidence pointed to slips and trips, which actually only accounts for 21%. So it's the fact that people cannot control the way that they move is the biggest cause of falling. And what do we work on in class?
how we move.
How you move. How you control the way that you shift your weight. Okay? So every time I tell you to keep your back up straight, your head up tall, and your eyes up, these are the things that I'm talking about. Is how to control where your balance is. Okay? And you actually don't need complicated exercises to do that. So things like when we do like the Shibashi form, when we do the weight shifting forward and backwards, that's one of the best things that you can do to make your awareness. When somebody's doing that and you hear me say back up straight, head up tall, eyes up, that's because somebody's leaning because they're not correctly shifting their weight. When we do things like obstinate child kicks its leg, and all of these things.
Bending the knees.
Bending the knees. Yes. Okay. So, like this study basically says, do Tai Chi. At least in my opinion. Okay. So, going back to the increase in fall rates, so between 2007 and 2016, the death rates increased 30%. So by 2030, they are estimating that there will be 7 deaths every hour amongst seniors because of falls. Which is actually when I hit that age group. But remember that you do have the ability to reduce your risk of fall. So the question is, are you at risk of falling?
Obviously.
Yeah.
So the primary assessment that you can do is to ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is, have you fallen in the past year? Are you afraid that you might fall? And do you frequently need to use your arms to get up out of a chair? If your answer is yes to any one of those questions, you are at a greater risk of falling. Okay? And so if you answer yes to any of those questions, it really is something that you should be talking to your primary healthcare provider about. So if you get sent to like a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or somebody like that, they have more detailed ways to make an in-depth assessment of your fall risk. But as an individual, these are the 3 questions that you should ask yourself on a reasonably regular basis. And if your answer changes from no to yes in any one of those, you should talk to your primary healthcare provider about it. And so you should reassess your risk regularly and take the appropriate action, which is, if you answer yes, you talk to your primary healthcare provider. Because you do have the ability to reduce your risk. So here we go. It's taken us a while to get here, I know, but the things that you can do to reduce your risk of falls. This is the important thing. Prevention is way better than cure. It's also significantly cheaper, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. And so there are definite things that you can do. So I did find this cartoon. Yeah. And sometimes it really is as obvious as that. But because people are in denial, they don't realize how these things can compound themselves. So, when we looked about risk factors, we did it from different aspects. So, biological factors. So, you cannot control your age, you cannot control your sex, you cannot control chronic diseases that you have, and you cannot control mental impairment. Okay? So those may be helped, but you can modify muscle weakness, you can modify your walking, you can address balance issues, and you can address your vision. Okay? So one of the most important things that you can do is make sure that you eat a regular, well-balanced, healthy diet. Because if you miss a meal, it changes your body's chemistry, it changes your blood pressure, it changes all sorts of things, it can cause dizziness. So making sure that you eat a regular, well-balanced diet is extremely important. Making sure that your eyesight is where it should be. So making sure that you see at least once a year, get your eyes checked. Every so often, especially if you are put on a new medication, is get your medications checked. Because there are definite, it's not just the medication itself, it can be the way that that medication interacts with other medications. So it is extremely important that you get all of your prescriptions filled in one pharmacy. Do not shop around for better prices. Because your pharmacist should be checking for interactions between your drugs. And so the next time that you go, it's always a good idea to ask them. It's like, you know, you're getting a prescription filled, and just ask them, it's like, you know, okay, I'm on these medications. Have you checked about the interactions of these medications and what effects that they have? But if you get your prescriptions filled at different pharmacies, they can't do that. So, very important to get all of your prescriptions filled in one pharmacy. You may well save a couple of dollars, but you may well have to spend hundreds or thousands later on because of an interaction. And it's not just because of the balance and the falling aspect. Okay? Wear sensible shoes. Do we all have sensible shoes on? That's a good question. Do not ever turn up to one of my classes in Crocs. You will be berated. Crocs are one of the most awful things for your balance. They're a trip hazard. They're just bad for you. So we should be wearing sensible shoes. They should be close fitting and they should be properly laced. Okay? How many of you were told when you were younger to wear sensible shoes? How many of you told your children to wear sensible shoes? How many of you still have high heels in the closet that you think you may well wear one day? One of the other important things is, if you are not wearing shoes, is do not wear socks or stockings or tights or anything like that, because they can be very slippy on a smooth surface. Okay? There are socks that you can get that have little grippy things on the bottom. Those are good. But plain socks, no.
What about thick-soled athletic shoes?
Thick-soled athletic shoes, as long as they're well-fitting, low-heeled, and that they're properly laced up, then they're good. Avoid osteoporosis. Easier said than done. However, if you do some exercises, and particularly if you do Tai Chi, last year we had the example of one lady at Roselle who came in after her annual physical and her bone density is increasing.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
yes.
That's good to know.
So like in the last year, I've had 2 people who have told me that in their 70s that their bone density is increasing, which is just awesome. Because the weaker your bones are, the greater your risk of falling. Okay? Vitamin D can be helpful for bone strength. That is something that you may want to talk to your primary healthcare provider about as well.
In this area, they say vitamin D deficiency is prominent.
Vitamin D deficiency is very prominent because people don't get out in the sun anymore. And when they do get out in the sun, they cover themselves up because they're afraid of skin cancer. Which the risk of skin cancer is negligible.
They also have
Yeah.
physical therapy now for osteoporosis. When I went to my healthcare provider, it's new, but they, because I wanted to do some exercises and they wanted to show me what exercises not to do with osteoporosis.
Okay.
So that was,
So-
it's new. It's a new kind of thing.
So physical therapy for for osteoporosis.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to try and do some research on that and see what they're doing.
okay, yeah,
Because so often they just steal stuff.
okay.
They what?
Okay.
Still stuff?
Yes. Exercise regularly. Go out for a walk. And when you go out for a walk, if you can expose your skin, your forearms, your face to the sun, it's about, if I remember correctly, it's about 20 minutes a day of sun on your face and your forearms will give you, your body will create enough vitamin D from that to maintain your levels. But the lack of vitamin D in people is a problem. And it really is about finding out what the best form of exercise for you is. Not everybody is different. Okay?
John,
Chris?
like this winter, like I have a lot of south-facing windows and a lot of sun comes in. If it comes in through the window, are you still getting vitamin D?
Are you still getting vitamin D coming in through the window? I do not know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I think so many windows have
Yeah.
the shield, the sun
Yes.
shields
Yeah,
on
they
them
do.
that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
probably doesn't penetrate.
Yeah, and I suppose it really does depend on the window, right?
Yeah. And when it's 20 below, I just say to open the window.
So the basic answer to that is no.
No?
The answer in general is no. Because if you're sitting indoors by a sunny window, because ultraviolet B rays, the ones that your body needs to make vitamin D, cannot get through the glass.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the answer is no. It has to be direct sunlight. That's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to be biased because, say, join the Tai Chi class, because Tai Chi is proven to be the most effective way of improving your balance, reducing your risk of falling amongst seniors. Johns Hopkins showed that adults 70 or older reduced their risk by more than 58%.
Nice.
Again, that's a pretty significant number. All right, behavioral factors. As my parents told me, there is nothing about your behavior that cannot be modified. So things that we want to modify risky behavior. So those of you that have mentioned that your children are suggesting that you do not climb up ladders, good for your children because that is risky behavior. And if you can get somebody else to do it, then do it. Okay? And again, but it's not about not doing anything. It's about not doing the things that are putting you at risk of something. Okay? So having 4+ medications. If you're over the age of 65, the average American is on either 7 or 8 medications. So if you're on less than that, you're below average. I saw a headline in the paper the other day that said 50% of schools in America are below average. Whether you're on psychoactive medication, so things that change your brain, and inactivity. So inactivity, again, is one of the big ones. So one of the important things is take your time. Okay, we've already had a couple of examples of that. Because if you're rushed, if you're distracted, those things increase your risk of falling. Things like getting out of bed. Okay, getting out of bed may seem easy enough to do, but if you have problems with your blood pressure, the change of attitude from being lying to sitting to standing, your blood pressure cannot always keep up. So it's a good idea when you're getting out of bed to sit up first, wait a moment, make sure that your blood pressure equalizes, and then stand up. And again, just wait a few moments to make sure that your blood pressure is okay, and then move about. Okay? Because if your blood pressure does not keep up with your change in attitude, you get dizzy and you fall. Which is why, one of the reasons why a lot of falls happen between the bedroom and the bathroom, because you get up at night to go to the toilet and you don't give yourself adequate time in order to do that. So tread carefully, watch where you are stepping. Again, we've had that example of that, about watching where you're going, which can be compounded by the fact that not everything is easily visible. So an important thing is to keep in touch. Somebody I know going back, this happened to them maybe in about 2003, is they were going up in their attic and the ladder that they were using slipped and they fell and they broke their leg. They were alone in the house. They were lying there for hours before their wife came home and was able to call an ambulance. So it's not just that they fell and broke a leg, it's the fact that they fell, broke a leg, and then they lay on the floor for hours because they had no way to move, no way to contact anybody, and no way to get help. They just had to sit and wait until their spouse got home and they could do something. So having a cell phone with you at all times is a really good idea. If you consider yourself to be at high risk, having one of the emergency alerts that you just hit the button and help is going to be on the way is important. Communication, arranging with family members or with a friend to just touch base every day. It's give them a call or text them a message and how are you doing today? Because if you know that they don't reply, then something's wrong. Because there are so many people that live on their own, especially in later life. Because most people will end up being either a widow or a widower at some stage. And again, if you're at home alone, you fall and you don't have any way to move to get contact with somebody, who knows how long it could be. So important to be able to have a good form of communication with you, which is one of the advantages that we have with cell phones now, is that you can always have a phone with you. DuPage County Sheriff's Office actually does provide a cell phone program, so they will provide cell phones to people who cannot afford their own cell phone. They're basically phones that are donated by people They're reprogrammed, so all they can do is dial 911, and they give them out to people that can't afford them, which is good because it means that old phones are recycled and people have a way of getting help successfully. If you have any old cell phones lying around, bring them in, and I do collect them and take them every so often to the sheriff's department. So behavioural factors, so again, exercise. Is get some exercise. So environmental factors, we've had a good example of environmental factors. So things that you can't modify, basically the climate that you live in, whether it's a cold climate or a hot climate. It's not easy to modify uneven pavements. Best thing to do is complain to the city, because if they get more than 2 calls about one piece of uneven pavement, they'll do something about it because they know that they are then liable. It's very difficult to do things about poor designs. So a poor design would be the black painted speed bumps in a dark place. Things that we can modify clutter in and around our homes. We can get rid of trip hazards, we can modify poor lighting, and we can modify our homes themselves to reduce our risk.
Get rid of scatter rugs.
Yes. Poor lighting is one thing that got me. It's like when I first came to the US, it's like the amount of rooms that don't have a light in them. It's like, why is there no light in the ceiling? That just confounded me. You know, every room I'd ever been in before that had a ceiling light. And I come to an American condo and walk in, and it's like, there's no light in the ceiling. That was like...
It's the ambience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it confounded me because I'd never experienced that before.
Yeah.
Every other room I'd ever been into had a ceiling light. And I just still find it strange. So, well, there we go. So clear the way. So get rid of clutter. It's like go into your home and like stuff lying around, particularly on the floor, move it. Get rid of it. Okay? So books, magazines, anything that you've got lying around the floor, move it. Get it out of the way. Throw rugs, best thing that you can do with a throw rug, throw it away. If you do like to have throw rugs down, make sure that they either have like the non-slip back to them, or that you use carpet tape to tape them down. Because it's only a matter of time before the edges start to curl, and the moment the edges start to curl, the risk of falling and tripping increases. Okay? So we've mentioned this, and so like that stool is like these chairs. It has this curved edge. You imagine sitting on that stool? It's designed to tilt over. You know, it's like, this is like, a lot of the time, it's like some designers that are oblivious to the things that they design. You know, it's beautiful. I mean, as a piece of furniture, it looks nice, but it's dangerous. So, at the very least, put it against a wall. Even better, get rid of it. Because if it's there, you're likely to use it. Or somebody's likely to use it. So, looking at the design of things like that. So the bathroom is extremely important. You must have non-slip mats in your bath, in your shower, when you get out of the shower. So a lot of baths and showers now are designed with grippy surfaces, so there's less of a need for in-bath and in-shower ones, but when you get out of the bath or out of the shower, like water on a tile floor is dangerous. So having a properly designed bath mat is important. Okay? So having properly installed grab bars, you know, if your shower is in the bath and you need to do that climb over, you want to have something to hold on to. And so it's important that any grab bars or handrails like that are correctly installed. Because if they're only put into drywall, they're of no use whatsoever. Staircases is another place. Is like a staircase should at the very minimum have a handrail on one side, but preferably on both sides, and running the full length of the stairs. Light the way. So make sure that you have good lighting in your home. Use night lights. And importantly, it's not only about having lights in your home and having good lighting in your home, but it's also about using it. Especially if you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and you don't want to wake your spouse up, so you're like, I know where I'm going. I'm not going to wake them up by switching the lights on. Switch the lights on. If they complain, do you want to spend the next 6 hours in the emergency room? No. Then I'm putting the light on. So, lights, use them. It is very good that we now have more of lights that have the sensors so that they come on when you go into a space. You don't have the choice. That's very, very handy. Importantly as well is keep a flashlight handy. You should have, if you have a multi-level home, you should have at least one flashlight on every level of your home. Because if you have a flashlight next to your bed and you're in the basement when the lights go out, that flashlight is of no use to you whatsoever. But having a flashlight next to your bed is hugely important. Because you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, the electric's gone out, you can't switch the lights on. You want to be able to just reach out, grab hold of a flashlight and have light. So keep a flashlight on every level of your home and check it periodically to make sure that it works. And remember to check your home for all of these hazards. So it is very difficult to go and look at your own home with different eyes. So one of the things that I do recommend is that you get together with a friend and look at each other's home. Because you will look at somebody else's home in a very different way than you look at your own home. Because that chair that's always been there, that's fine. But when somebody else looks at it and they see the curved base, they'll go, hold on a minute. So it is a good idea to go and look at somebody else's house and give them ideas. Okay? Questions? Nothing? All right. It's quiz time.
Oh, dear.
I told you there would be an exam in this class, and this goes for those of you participating at home as well. Can you spot the hazards?
Oh my God.
Uneven pavement.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that's-
So we're going to start off easy. You know, it's not a difficult thing.
No.
You know, there's a damaged sidewalk there. The roots of the tree have upset it. So what do you do about it? You call the city and you tell them about it. Because they say if they get more than a few calls, somebody falls on it and they bring a lawsuit, and the lawyer goes, did you have any warning about this? And they go, yeah, we've had like 10 calls about that, but we didn't do anything about it.
Clutter.
Okay, so the first thing is that we have clutter on the stairs. Plus you're on the stairs, you're going down the stairs, you trip over something. What else do we have in here?
I'd like to have a handrail on the other side.
Handrail.
A handrail would be good, yes. So I was going with loose stair carpet on this one.
Oh.
So if you have carpet on your stairs, make sure that that carpet is well fitted.
Stay out that ladder.
Lord.
It's not even booked on, yeah.
Oh my
Oh, good
God.
Lord.
Oh.
All right, risky behavior. So we make wise choices about the activities that we participate in and how safely we do those activities. Okay? So you get above a certain age, you may not want to be climbing up a 2-story ladder.
Oh dear.
Snow, slippery.
Yeah, snow and slippery. So we've got an icy sidewalk. I mean, it's been cleared, but it's not been cleared very well. So we need to be cognizant of the world around us, of going out in the morning and going, you know, this sidewalk has not been cleared very well. You know, and if you're living in like an apartment block or somewhere like that, and they've got like salt just inside the door, it's like, go and throw some salt down. But the way that you clear your own home, your driveway, your sidewalks, you know, make sure that it's done properly. What is our fall risk here?
Having those rocks and stuff.
Those rocks, I mean, you know, so, you know, the designer has very nicely put these nice round concrete spheres down between the road and the sidewalk to stop cars coming up onto the sidewalk, which is awesome. But they're exactly at shin height. And if you don't see them, those are very easy to trip over. If you don't, even if you don't trip over them and you just crack your shin on it, we've got a problem there. So this is a great example of one of the environmental conditions where the design of it is not conducive to people getting around easily. We've got a few in here.
The socks.
All right, so, yep. So we have that he's wearing socks and socks on a slippy surface.
Drinking.
Yes. So the use of alcohol increases your risk of falling.
And it's a soft upholstered thing, it's hard to get out of. For me, it would be.
So again, and we had Pam said that wearing only socks increases the risk of falls. And how active do you think he is?
Not very, he's a little on the heavier side.
A little on the heavier side as well.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank my brother for letting me use his photograph in this.
Oh,
A
yeah.
trip
Oh,
board,
boy,
a
that's,
cord.
yeah.
Okay, so we've got an uncovered electrical lead is a big trip hazard.
That chair could be with the wheels on it too. right?
So the chair with the wheels on it
Mm.
is a balance hazard. Because if you notice that chair only has 4 legs on it. A well-designed office chair has 5, because 5 legs is less likely to overbalance than 4 legs. So if you have an office chair that only has 4 legs, get rid of it.
Ooh.
Gee.
So we got a couple in here.
There must have been something there.
It's more the
It
first.
says slippery, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah,
it's
there's a sign there that says it's slippery.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Okay? So being aware, again, of the things that are around you. You know, those things are bright yellow for a reason, to try and draw your attention to them. Okay? So if you see one of those bright yellow signs with the slippery surface, it's like, if you can go around the area, go around the area. Okay? So the other one in here, what is going to increase your risk of falling?
Does he get slippery shoes or something?
I don't know.
So the fact that this person has fallen once means that he's at a greater risk of falling again.
All right.
Clutter.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is an easy one.
Yeah.
Clutter.
Oh, my goodness.
It's like clutter increases your risk of falling. Whether it's stuff falling over onto the floor and you're trying to climb over it, or you're trying to reach something over it, clutter.
And that stool looks like it's only got 4 feet on wheels too.
There you
It does, yes.
Okay.
I put that in deliberately to see if you'd learn from the previous slide.
Oh gosh.
Oh.
So what do we have here?
Cords.
Cords.
Yep, so the first one is that we have this huge pile of untidy cords. And then,
Well, the cord on the heating pad or whatever it is in front of him.
yeah,
instead of-
the cord,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, the cord to the heating pad is right in front of him.
And he's got a tray on the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah.
And either the tray or the footstool is another trip hazard as well there. Because again, it only takes that moment of distraction.
Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's bad.
That's bad.
Oh,
Oh my
yes.
gosh.
That's
So yes, so there we go. Yes, we have risky behavior.
Jeez.
Now that's a 20-year-old who is oblivious to everything.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Yes, the 20-year-old is oblivious to everything.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we had before,
Clutter.
clutter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, they're climbing up, they're reaching over stuff,
Oh.
basically because they can't get a ladder to where they need to be
because of the clutter.
because of the clutter.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
No
gosh.
stair rails.
That was an easy one. The lack of handrails increases the risk of falling.
Yeah.
Lighting.
Light.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so poor lighting increases your risk of falling. Don't think too hard.
Did
Blurry.
they get up and
Is it
do
risky
that?
behavior or something?
Not risky behavior.
Just-
Can you see what's going on?
No.
Oh.
So it is,
Can't see. Blurry.
can't see, poor vision.
Oh,
If you
dear
can't
Lord.
see,
Oh.
Huh. Yes.
a mess.
Yeah.
So, like all the fruit off the tree has fallen on the sidewalk, it's got crushed, that stuff can be very slippy. So again, it's things like this, being aware of where you are and what you're doing.
The dog.
The
Oh,
dog!
the dog.
I actually had this firsthand the week before last. I was sat on my bench in the forest preserve, and there's a lady and her sister come for a walk most mornings, and they're walking their dog, and like I'm sitting there like gazing up at the clouds, like oblivious, and the next thing I hear is ah, and like she'd fallen.
Oh, jeez.
Fortunately, she didn't hurt herself, but her dog got under her feet and she tripped over the dog. So
Yeah.
being aware of pets and where they are and what they're doing. I suppose you could say spouses as well. Notice where they are and what they're doing.
Underfoot.
Socks.
Oh, yes.
That's a good one, yes. So socks or stockings on a slippery surface is a definite no-no.
Oh,
High
my
heels.
Oh, no.
It took a while to get to the shoes. It was like, oh my God.
So impractical shoes increases the risk of falls. How often do you see these videos of supermodels on the catwalk
Yeah.
that trip over?
That's just.
Because two reasons: they don't have the space between their feet and they're wearing impractical shoes.
Oh.
And you can see from her heels as well that those do not fit very well either.
Oh.
I sometimes get distractions when I put that slide up, but you know, you're the wrong sort of people to think that Paris Hilton is a distraction.
What the?
No hand
Oh,
rails.
no grab bars.
Oh, he's grabbing onto. Oh.
So we got two things here. First of all, we got risky behaviour. So is he balanced?
No.
No, he's far from balanced.
Oh, man.
And then what you've just said is the lack of handrails. So he's using a towel rail, which is most likely screwed into drywall. And even if it was screwed into a stud, it's just going to break because it's designed to support a towel that weighs like 3 pounds versus somebody that weighs 100, 150 pounds. So remember to check your own home for all of these hazards, or preferably go to somebody else's home and check their home as well. What do you do now? So the first thing that you want to do is go through that assessment and assess your balance and your risk of falling. So what were the 3 questions that you should ask yourself? Have I fallen in the past year?
Am I afraid?
Am I afraid of falling?
Do I use my hands to get out of the chair?
Do I frequently use my arms to get up out of a chair? Yes. So you want to use that assessment on a regular basis. Okay? Then check with your healthcare provider, check the safety, appropriateness and the interactions of medications. If you haven't had your vision checked in the last 12 months, get it checked. Start or continue an exercise program. Start or continue a Tai Chi program. Check your home and your garden for risks. Decide if there's any home modifications needed. So if you're still showering in a bath, you may think about getting a walk-in shower. Things like that. Getting handrails installed. Homes where you have, where you've had wooden flooring put over part of it and you've got like an inch lip from one room to another, things like that. So remember that falls do not have to happen to you. You can reduce your risk. It's very difficult to eliminate your risk completely, but there are definitely things that you can do to reduce your risk of falling. So thank you very much for coming out to our class today.
Thank you, Jen.
And thank you very much for those of you at home that stayed at home and came to our class today.
That's good.
Any final questions?
Lots to think about, I'll
Lot-
say that.
lot to
I'm gonna
think
go
about.
home and
I
kind of
know,
go
that's,
through
I
the
know,
house.
I'm going home.
Gonna pick up a couple of night lights for
Mine
some
is-
key areas.
Yeah.
Clutter.
And,
That's what I gotta do, clutter.
So things like that of making those decisions of like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get some night lights, I'm going to get some flashlights. That's the important thing is to start
Yeah,
and to do something.
yeah.
Because if you never start, it'll never happen. So if like the simplest thing is making sure that you have a flashlight next to your bed, that's one thing taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah.